Good afternoon. So I'm Gaël Blondel. I'm the director of the Eclipse Foundation in Europe. And before we start talking about cloud native Java, you may wonder why I am giving a talk about something else than the IDE. But the fact is that we have dozens of projects hosted by the Eclipse Foundation that are not related to the IDE. Okay. Wow. Okay. More precisely, we have more than 350 projects. The Eclipse Foundation is supported by 280 members. By members, I mean that's companies that give us some money every year to support our operations. We have 30 people around the world, mainly in North America and Europe. And we help 1,500 developers collaborate on all those projects. And one detail, I'll come back to that later, but the 30 people, the 30 team members at the foundation are not really developing on the Eclipse project. We are doing something else. So just to give you a few concrete examples about the other domains we have tons of technologies in IoT. So I invite you to visit iot.eclipse.org. Science.eclipse.org is about data visualization and data processing and visualization. Location Tech, that's location-aware technologies. OpenMDM is something that you may never hear about. That's a project in automotive, and we have several projects in automotive. And now, since this year, we have Jakarta EE, which is something huge, and I think also a big move for the Java EE community. So, okay, it started a long time ago with the Eclipse IDE, but just to be clear that now we are a platform for open innovation and collaboration that embodies lots of different domains. And so, as a team member of the foundation, I'm not a developer, and we have lots of ex-developers. But what do? We are providing an infrastructure to help people collaborate together. So you should just notice that maybe today, okay, you can create your project on GitHub or GitLab, and you are set up for collaboration very quickly. But when the story started 15 years ago, then having a good forge with bug tracker, repositories, wikis, mailing list, everything, that was very important, and that is still important. And even if we allow project to work on GitHub, so we have Eclipse project hosted at GitHub, we still mirror everything on our own infrastructure because we call that our freedom of action. So we can rebuild everything from what we have in the infrastructure. We also do community development. So we organize events, we participate to events. We have a booth downstairs, and we will be happy to meet you there. We have a big task is process and governance. So we have the Eclipse development process that applies to all Eclipse projects. We have a new process that I will describe a bit later, which is the Eclipse Foundation specification process. So we have something to create open source specifications. We also have another process that is not completely formalized, but that we have been running for more than 10 years. That's a synchronous release train process. So you know that every year the Eclipse IDE publishes a new release. And now, since Eclipse Photon that was published in June, we decided to move that to every quarter. But that the process applies to the Eclipse IDE, but that's certainly something that at some point, and maybe in a different form, will also apply to Jakarta, for example. One detail in terms of governance, there is no specific rights for specific members. So first, yeah, IBM created Eclipse long time ago, but they have the same rights and duties as the other members of the foundation. We are vendor neutral, and the large players, the big players, those who pay $250,000 a year, they gain a seat on the board of director, and the board of director has absolutely no influence on the technical decisions of the project. The technical decisions of the projects are taken by the developers themselves and by the project leaders. So what the board of director is doing is telling me, okay, you should go to this conference, or we should take this direction, like investing in IoT or investing in artificial intelligence or whatever. But on a specific project, the project team is completely independent and in charge of taking the decisions. And finally, intellectual property management. Intellectual property management is very important. That's usually boring process. That's something that developers don't like to do. And we have a team dedicated to that. And we set it, that's really in a collaboration between our team and the development teams to make sure that basically everything you download from an Eclipse server, you can safely create products on top of it. Because that's really our DNA to enable the creation of a business-friendly ecosystem based on extensible platforms. So that you know that the IDE is a system with plugins, and okay, there are plenty of plugins and plenty of people who created applications on top of it. And we have other examples like Eclipse Chief, for example, the cloud-based IDE. And this schema applies to almost everything we do at the foundation. And that's also with the Eclipse public license and all the processes, that's really to help people collaborate on the platform and create products on top of the platform. But even if we have this business-friendly approach, if we want our members to make business with the technologies they host at Eclipse, we are a real open source community. And by real open source community, I mean that we have 3 core values. The first one is transparency. So everything that happens in a project should be reflected in one of the public media of the project, the mailing list, the wiki, whatever. But the principle is that somebody who is outside of the project can follow up what's happening, and then they can start participating. That's openness. An Eclipse project is open to everybody. And if one of our roles at the foundation is that if you don't manage to enter in a project, then we are here to help you enter the project. But openness is also, it works only with meritocracy. So everybody can participate to a project, but you have to prove that you have the skills to participate to the project. You start by contributing to the mailing list, by reporting bugs, by sending small contributions, and then you will be elected by the current committers of the project to join the project team. That's very important, and that applies to everything. So now that after this short presentation of what we do and how we work at the foundation, let's get back to cloud-native Java and why we say that the future of cloud-native Java is open. So for the last 6 years, I would say, we have more and more projects that can be seen as fitting in the cloud-native Java approach. So it started with Vertex. That's the oldest project on this slide. So which is a reactive framework in Java. Then OpenJ9 and MicroProfile. So OpenJ9 has a JVM and a microprofile for enterprise Java microservices. And the latest addition to this stack is Jakarta EE. So let me tell you few words about Eclipse OpenJ9. So Eclipse OpenJ9, that's the JVM that was that has been developed from the beginning by IBM, and in 2017 they decided to publish it in open source. So that's not just a new JVM; it has been there for forever. But the new thing is that it's an open source project. It's dual licensed under Eclipse public license and GPL v2 with ClassPass exception. And well, it has good characteristics if you consider cloud native Java, because it has a low memory footprint and fast startup times. So it means that if you have server microservices that start often, then they start faster. And if your microservices consume significant memory, then you will save something like 50% of your memory. So that's on the. You can go on the website and you will find the results of some benchmark they did with OpenJ9. And also they have some well, you can find presentations from Steve Poole and other guys from the team that would give much more details. But I think that this kind of feature, for example, is very interesting. Instead of having the classes in all your Docker instances, then you can do class sharing even in between containers. So that's still some memory saving and good for your cloud deployment. And you can get it. So you can get it from adoptopenjdk.net. So I was there yesterday to update this slide, and you see that you can choose the version you want to download, and then you can choose the Java virtual machine. So basically, you get OpenJDK plus hotspot or OpenJDK plus OpenJ9, and you download it, you install it, and you have your JVM. Second in my list is Eclipse microprofile. So they got the Duke Choice Award at the latest Oracle Code One. And what is Eclipse microprofile? That's an open source community of people, organizations, software vendors who collaborate in an Eclipse project to define specifications for enterprise Java microservices. So for the moment, when we talk about Eclipse microprofile, we are talking about only the specifications. And there are several implementations. So OpenLiberty, Thorntail, Payara Micro. So you can get the list of implementations and also the version of the specifications they support. And here is a list of organizations involved in this. Recently Oracle joined this project by as Oracle Eliden is supporting also microprofile specifications. So what is Eclipse microprofile? Basically, it started with this set of four specifications. So CDI, JSON-P, JSON-B, JAX-RS. So you see that it's what you need to create a Java microservice in Java. Then after that, and with a release early, release often approach, they add all the non-functional non-functional specifications that you need to manage your microservice. So typically health check, to get the result. Okay, is my microservice still working? Metrics with default metrics, but also application level metrics. Fault tolerance. So typically, if you have a chain of microservice, then you can add annotations with, for example, circuit breakers or stuff like that. Open tracing for service for tracing between services along the service chain. Open API, REST client. So you see that it's mostly sets of annotations, and with those sets of annotations, you have everything you need to create microservices. One interesting stuff with Eclipse MicroProfile is that it's really lightweight process to define new specifications. And typically, nowadays, Vertex team from Red Hat and Lightbend are collaborating on a new spec for streaming and reactive programming in MicroProfile. And so that's where I wanted to mention Vertex, which will be a sort of reference implementation of this specification, and which provides everything you need to implement reactive programming, reactive stream. So that's very lightweight, polyglot framework that's with an event loop and non-blocking, completely asynchronous framework for your microservices. So you can go to microprofile.io, and if you subscribe to the mailing list, then you will see this new specification about streaming and reactive programming in action. And finally, Jakarta EE. So, okay, last year at JavaOne, Oracle, together with IBM, Red Hat, and the other Java EE partners, announced that they would move Java EE in open source under the stewardship of the Eclipse Foundation, with the goal of making it more agile, more open, and more vibrant. So since last year, there has been a lot of work, because moving Java EE from something that is completely managed by Oracle to something that is completely open source, it means creating something like 40 new projects with 160 committers, 99 Git repositories, and also this the build pipelines. That's 53 Jenkins instances to build Jenkins pipelines to create for the release engineering. So that's huge. And it represents 15% of the whole Eclipse Foundation community activities. And also all those projects that has passed the intellectual property due diligence, even if everything was prepared by Oracle and they did a great job to make it happen, that it means that our intellectual property management team, they already reviewed 30% more pieces of software than what they did in the full year of 2017. So that's lots of software, lots of activity, and here is the status. So all the 39 proposals have gone through the steps of, okay, we publish a proposal, there is a public review of the proposal, we design the initial committers of the project, because they are the guys in charge at the beginning, and they are also the guys who will co-opt other, elect other committers that will join the project. there is the creation of the project with all the resources you need to collaborate. So your GitHub project, the mailing list, the bug trackers, and everything. And there is the initial contribution. Initial contribution means that the owners of the project intellectual property, they have to put together all the sources, to send all the sources to the Eclipse Foundation, and then the Eclipse Foundation will review the intellectual property, and when it's okay, we know where it comes from, we know that the people who wrote the code have the right to publish it in open source in this, under these conditions, so you can push your code to the Git repository. And then you are in the working in an Eclipse Foundation repository status. And if you look at this status, that is the current status, everything now is in this working in an Eclipse Foundation repository status. So it means that all the projects have been migrated to the Eclipse servers, and the community can start collaborating on the project. And now the next step is doing a release review to create the first official release according to the Eclipse development process. So that's for the technical part. On the organizational part, we have the Jakarta EE working group. And what is the Jakarta EE working group doing? That's approving specifications, because still, you know that in Java EE, you had the specifications managed by the Java community process, the reference implementation, Glassfish, and the technology compatibility kit. And what's really interesting in moving Java EE to Jakarta EE is that not only Glassfish is open source and moves to the Eclipse Foundation, it was already open source, by the way. So that's not a big difference. But the technology compatibility kits are also open source, and that's very important. And all the specifications will be managed in an open source way. So yeah, the Jakarta EE working group approves the specification, manages the Jakarta EE brand, because we are establishing a new brand. So it means that, yeah, we will protect this brand. That has value. That not everybody will be able to say, okay, I am Jakarta EE compliant. I'll come back to that later. And also establish the technical roadmap, because even if it becomes open and more agile, we still need to have some coordination and to have some a bit of vision to where it is going. That's vendor neutral, so everybody can have a seat at the table. So that includes, okay, the software vendors, enterprises, system integrators. We also have even Java user groups, Java communities. Some parts of the Java communities are joining this effort. So if you look at the Jakarta EE working group members, on the left side, we have, I would say, the usual suspects. So that's companies that sell enterprise Java middlewares. So, okay, IBM, Fujitsu, Oracle, Red Hat. That's also nice to have smaller companies like Payara and Tommy Tribe, because I think that that's also one of the values of our open source ecosystem, to mix those big fishes with the smaller fishes, and to make them work together. On the participant side, yeah, we have London Java community, for example. We have Pivotal is a member, because if you think about it, Spring, most of the Spring relies on lots of Java EE and just Jakarta EE specification. And another example, we have Mizuho. Mizuho is a bank, and so that's a Japanese bank, and we are working with their people in London, and they are using lots of Java EE, and they want to participate to Jakarta EE because they want to inject their requirements, and they want to influence the directions of the specifications. So what does it mean to have the TCK open source? Maybe some of you know that before, when you were using when you wanted to access the TCK, you had to pay a license to Oracle. And now it's just open source, so you can download the TCK and you can start running the TCK, and you can study what's in the test. You can, if something is not running as expected, you can even think that, okay, maybe that's an error a bug in my implementation, or maybe it's an error in the test. And so that's something new to have the TCK open source. You can look into it. You can understand how it is supposed to work. You can also submit a patch if you think that the TCK is wrong, and that's more open. Sharing also the responsibility of managing and maintaining the TCKs. And the last point is important, that's vendor neutrality, but also continuity. And I would say that in the past, we saw several projects in the Eclipse ecosystem where some of the actors of the projects were switching to other priorities. But when you have a project that is useful and necessary for lots of people, then other actors will step in and say, okay, I need it to work, I need it to be released, and that's also important in this context, that even the TCK will be more sustainable thanks to this open source. So the roadmap. We started with Oracle Glassfish 5.0, which was Java EE 8 compliant. And by the end of the year, there will be Eclipse Glassfish 5.1. So it is still Java EE 8 compliant. So that's just the result of moving everything under the stewardship of the Eclipse Foundation. And now we are the community starts working on Eclipse Glassfish 5.2, and Eclipse Glassfish 5.2 will be compliant with Jakarta EE 8. So it means that the first step was moving the source code, and the new step is setting up the new processes for specification. And okay, so Jakarta EE 8, that will still be something very similar to the Java EE 8 you know, but then that's the time when everything will start evolving more quickly, and when you will see innovation that will be injected in Jakarta EE 9, Jakarta EE 10, and the promise is the commitment of all the actors is that it will go faster than what was happening before. And how will it work? How will it be more open? That also stands in the Eclipse Foundation specification process. This specification process is not a lot different from the Eclipse development process. So the first step is, okay, you want to create a new specification, then you have to publish a proposal and to gain some interest from the community, and then there will be a creation review, and you will have a space to work on your specification. Then you develop your specification, and you can create milestones, but at some point you will want to create a release of your specification, so a final specification, and then you will go through a release review, and we will change a bit the some stuff in your specification. That will be on the next slide, and then you start a new cycle. So the new cycle, you publish a plan of what you want to do, and then you develop according to the plan, and you release. So what is it to release a specification? So in a specification, we will have documentation, so that's text. We will have some technical artifacts, that's APIs, annotations, stuff like that. We will have a TCK, and also we need a compatible implementation. And more than that, we need an open source compatible implementation. So once you have everything ready, you have your release candidate, and then you want to promote it as a release. So you will go through a release review, and then the final specification, the text will be read-only, and the technical artifacts, you will have access only to the binaries, and that will be signed binaries. And before your specification becomes final, you need to have at least one compatible implementation released under one of the licenses accepted by the Eclipse Foundation, so EPL, BSD, or Apache. So that gives you a picture of how we make sure that it stays open. And yes, it can evolve more quickly, but still, we want that, okay, when you have a final specification, people have to be able to declare that, okay, I am compliant with this version of the specification. So what's new and what's similar to the previous process? So in the Java community process, it was specification first. Okay, you start a specification, then we will see how we implement it. In Jakarta EE, that's code first. You start with code, and then you write a specification that explains what's in the code. In the JCP, the specification lead had a very strong position, like he was holding the pen, and he had also all the intellectual property of the specification. In Jakarta EE, it's collaborative. Everybody keeps its intellectual property, and basically it means that the specification is open and stays open source. Something are similar, like the JCP have been doing public communication since the beginning, and still we will continue with public communication because everything needs to be transparent. Documentations and TCKs can be closed source in the JCP. They are mandatorily open source. It's mandatory to have the documents and TCKs in open source in Jakarta EE. And finally, in the JCP, you had one normative reference implementation, so Glassfish. And in Jakarta EE, we want one or more compatible implementations and at least one open source compatible implementation. So where are we now? So, okay, all the Java EE code is contributed to the Eclipse Foundation. Eclipse Glassfish 5.1 release candidate was published just before Code 1 and EclipseCon. We expect the Oracle team is working hard and the Eclipse team also are working hard to release Eclipse Glassfish 5.1 by December 14th. we have a draft of the Eclipse Foundation specification process that has been reviewed by the community, and we have a first specification using it. So we are testing it in real life with Jakarta EE NoSQL. I'm not sure that's a definitive name, that the final name may be a bit different than that, but Jakarta EE NoSQL, that's like JDBC for your NoSQL database. So, the question maybe, is it open? Is it really open? So yes, and we start to listen to the community. So we had this exercise in early October to prepare some answers to questions, to some generic questions before Oracle Code One and EclipseCon. And in a week, we received 74 answers to those questions. So, oops. Okay. That's not what I wanted to do, anyway. So the answers are, okay, we want more alignment with CDI. We want Java language and modularity improvements in Jakarta EE, microservices, cloud, serverless, and also the community wants to be involved. And the good news is that I really think that the current Jakarta EE team is ready to welcome new people. Okay, we are still in the transition, so sometimes, okay, the focus is we need to do this release by the end of the year, and we need to start the Jakarta EE specification process. But we are already ready to listen to ideas, okay, like I want this or I need that to make me successful with Jakarta EE. So that's open for participation. That's ready for innovation. That's we really want Jakarta EE to be the place where we design and develop the future of cloud-native Java. My advice would be subscribe to the mailing list, ask questions. There is no stupid question. Start answering to the questions of others, and then start contributing ideas to the roadmaps, to technical roadmaps. Or every time we send a link to a Google Doc on the mailing list with an invitation to participation, that's really a real invitation to participate. Thank you. So I was a bit shorter than expected, so if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer. So the question is Jakarta EE taking all the elements of Java EE? Yes. The answer is yes, as far as I know. Yeah, definitely yes. Everything is moved. There's no, and we also plan to have everything that needs to be. So if you look, so here you have okay, even EGBs. Even some older stuff like ORB, so that's here, and of course at some point we need to be more. In order to be more innovative, we will also have to deprecate some stuff. Yeah. I don't think so. But I don't know. But so for the moment, my understanding is that in every Java EE specification, you have a minimal Java SE version that needs to be supported. And I think that will be something similar, like in a Jakarta EE specification, you will certainly have a reference to a minimal LTS version of Java SE that needs to be supported. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not. I say that's so. The question is, will WebLogic application server for comply with that? I think that's a question to ask to Oracle product marketing or product management. I don't see a reason why it should not be, but that's not that's still the follow up of Java EE. So I think that if you are using WebLogic, you should ask your WebLogic contact what's their plan. Okay, thank you. And if you want to continue this conversation, I'll be on the booth.